What's up, guys? If your car's been running rough and your check engine light just popped on, odds are you're about to see one of the codes we're talking about today. Today we're going to be talking about the P0300 and related codes on this episode of Codes Explained. So, there's a lot of codes under P03 something, but several of them are very closely related, so I'm going to talk about a lot of them in one swoop here, and that's going to be P0300 and then P0301 through 312. Now, so there's two definitions we need to know here. P0300 is random multiple misfire. What this means is that the computer has recognized a misfire or several misfires somewhere. It's the vaguest of the P300 codes. And depending on what kind of car you have, it's possible that you may have this code by itself. I'm going to talk more about that in a minute. But the other codes, basically P0301 through 312, are all single cylinder misfire codes. They are great codes because they pack a lot of diagnostic information in that the second part of the code will tell you which cylinder the misfire is on. For example, P0304, the code that I had in my 97 Grand Prix for so long, literally is misfire cylinder 4. P0301, misfire cylinder 1. P0305, etc., all the way up to the 12th cylinder. OBD2 stuff does not support anything above that. But anyway, so there's different ways that you may see this. And what I was talking about before is not all misfire diagnostics on all cars are equal either. For example, most General Motors cars, but especially newer General Motors cars, are actually really well equipped to diagnose misfires for you. In that most of the time, if you have, for example, a bad injector, you'll have, say, P0304, but then you'll also have an injector fault code. And if that happens, that definitely points you in the direction of that injector being bad. Now, a lot of Fords, especially older Fords, don't support those codes, or they only support those codes under certain circumstances. I can tell you, for example, my 97 SHO had a single cylinder misfire when hot that it took 4 or 5 days to throw a specific cylinder misfire code. Why that's different is how they're programmed. Basically what it is there are a lot of little micro misfires that occur in engines all the time that they don't want to throw a code for because they could be conditional or just some engines run a little choppier than others. So in a decent scan tool, you should be able to pull up misfire counts for every cylinder. And you may see some register 1 or 2 off and on throughout, a few drive cycles, and that's not going to throw a code. But the ECU in the car is programmed to basically count a certain number of misfires per cycle, and once it sees that, throw the code. GM cars are pretty picky. They will generally throw a misfire code really quickly. Some of the older Fords were not. You had to see a lot of misfires before they would actually throw a specific code. Then a lot of cars will throw the P0300 first and may not throw an individual code until later. Now, another thing that can happen if you've got a P0300 by itself is that you may be experiencing exactly what the code is called, which is a random multiple misfire. It could be missing from multiple cylinders, especially say if you've got a car that hasn't been tuned up in a long time, so sort of all the spark plugs are not in really good shape, or something to that degree. So one important thing, though, to note about these codes is they do not specifically denote an ignition misfire. Anything that causes a weak combustion event will throw one of these codes. So a bad injector can throw one of these codes. A bad spark plug, a bad wire, a bad coil, all of these can throw the same codes, even to the point that you have low compression in a cylinder. So don't take P0300 and take that as, oh, I need spark plugs, or, oh, I need a coil for cylinder 4. Now, most coil-on plug cars, like the LS engines and like the V8 SHOs, and Mazda 6 cylinders, a lot of those, when they throw a 304, odds are it actually does have a bad coil, because a lot of those single cylinder coils do fail and they'll throw that code. But just as a reminder, if you see these codes, don't immediately jump to it's an ignition problem, because it may not be. And always pay attention to any other codes that you get with those codes. Another good example, my 97, for any of you who haven't seen the video, had a P0304 code when I got it. I went through a lot of stuff trying to diagnose that, and what it wound up being was actually a damaged camshaft that was causing the intake valve not to open. So it just couldn't get air in, that was making it misfire, P0304. And most of the time, combustion events, there's no way for the computer to monitor combustion. So it can't tell you that your combustion is low. All it can tell you is this cylinder is not firing correctly, because it can read the difference in power on that stroke. So, diagnostic speaking, the way I generally start when I have misfire codes, if you've got only a P0300, you need to find out if it's missing on one cylinder, two cylinders, all the cylinders, whatever, first. That's hard to do without a scan tool. You can do it very easily with a scan tool that will show you live data, because you can drive it and actually watch the misfire counts per cylinder. And if you've got one or two cylinders racking up misfire counts and the other cylinders are not, odds are you're working on something related to just that cylinder. If, on the other hand, all of the cylinders are missing randomly, then you're going to be looking at something that affects the whole engine. So think about something like air-fuel mixture or lack of fuel. I have seen cars with bad fuel pumps that were running so lean that the car was actually missing on multiple cylinders because the car just wasn't getting enough gas. The same can be said for rich running conditions. However, those problems are usually going to be accompanied by a system too rich or system too lean code. And you can also diagnose those problems by looking at the fuel trims and seeing whether they're high or low or whatever. So if your fuel trims are normal, you can pretty much assume, more or less, that it's not a fuel problem. But you could still have an individual injector go bad and cause a miss in that cylinder. So, another thing to check for. The only other thing I can think of that's really important with these is, one, remember that older Fords, though they may not throw those codes, especially if it's an OBD1 Ford, you can still do the cylinder balance test as part of the key-on engine running test, and that will tell you if you have a single cylinder misfire or which cylinders are weak. Also, for anyone who has a decent scan tool, you probably already know that sometimes you'll pull up a vehicle that you know should have misfire counts, but it will not have that option in there. But you can go into mode 6, I believe it's mode 6, which is your generic OBD2 commands. And I believe it's like PID 53 or something like that that is that monitor. And if the scan tool doesn't know it for this car, you might just get like 1, 0, 2, 0. But those are the misfire counts, so you can still tell by that which cylinder it is. So that's something else to look into if your scanner doesn't like that. The other option that you have is if you've got, you're pretty sure, a single cylinder that's missing. P0300 has come up, but you don't have an individual cylinder misfire yet. Another thing that you can check is disabling a coil at a time or unplugging an injector one at a time to see which one, when you unplug it, does not affect how the car is running. That will also tell you which cylinder is missing. So, a couple different ways to go about doing that there. Then, of course, if you do have a single cylinder, P0305, for example, and you know that cylinder is not firing, and that's the only code you have is the misfire code, then you're going to be looking at things like compression, if it's got good compression, what does the spark plug look like? If the spark plug's good, check the coil. If the coil's okay, check the fuel injector. And one of those things is more than likely going to test out. Unless you own a problem child like me, in which case you're going to pull half the motor apart to find out that the cam lobe wore off for no reason at all. But I hope you guys are more lucky than I am and you don't run into that. So that's most of it. Any other questions you guys have about the P0300 and associated codes, let me know down in the comments. I will respond to everyone and I will try to answer any questions that I can. Thank you guys for watching. Make sure you like this video if it was helpful. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't, and I will see you guys in the next video. Thank you for watching, and peace.